1 and part 2. Go watch those 2 episodes if you haven't already. It's going to change your entire orientation towards life and how you see human beings and yourself. And then this will take it just to the next level. So, first I want you to notice, just looking at the animal kingdom, looking at the shape of animals, literally look at the shape that animals take. Why does a snake have that kind of shape that it has, which is very different from the shape of a giraffe, which is different from the shape of a kangaroo, which is different from the shape of a bat, which is different from the shape of an octopus, which is different from the shape of a ant, and so on. As kids, we look at all these weird animals, like the platypus or something, and we're amused by these interesting creatures. You might even fall in love with some of them. But we don't really see just how serious their shape is. Their shape is not just some arbitrary thing. Their shape is how they survive. Without that shape, they couldn't survive. And of course, then we have to look at you. What about your shape? Of course, I'm talking about the external shape of your body. But for us human creatures, we're a little bit more complicated, and much of our survival happens at the conceptual level, at the level of mind, even more so than at the level of the physical body. Especially these days, with all the technology and stuff that we have, our external shape is becoming less important, and what our mind's shape is, the shape of our psyche, this determines everything that unfolds for you individually and for us collectively as a species. So let's explore that, because there's so much detail here. So who you are today was shaped by your early survival demands, just like the shape of a snake was gradually formed over millions and billions of years of evolution, of natural selection, where the shape of the snake was being fitted with that of the shape of the environment that it lives in. And there's many different kinds of snakes and many different kinds of environments, and they have different kinds of shapes. So the same with you. So your specific survival challenges in your youth and as you were growing up, especially during the first 20 years of your life, this shaped your psyche, and it shaped how you think, how you emote, and how you act. But the problem is that you're not very conscious of this. None of us are, unless we do this sort of investigation that we're about to do right now. And we completely forget how much we were shaped by all of the environments in which we were growing up when we were young. Many of the survival challenges you faced when you were 5 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old, now if you're in your 30s and 40s and later, your mind doesn't even hold, it can't even hold that much in its memory banks. I mean, it does deep down, but it's not at the top of your mind. And it becomes easily forgotten, and it's like layers upon which your psyche is built, and those layers upon which it's built, they're forgotten. And you just assume that, well, this is how I am now. This is who I am. This just feels like who I have always been. But if you look carefully, if you do some sort of psychic archaeology in your psyche, dig in there and root around, go back into your past, you can actually see how the layers of your psyche were built over the first 20 years of your life. And you can do some work there, because some of those layers are dysfunctional and are still creating problems for you to this day, but you've forgotten where they came from. Let's look into that. So I want you to start to really notice how much survival demands from your environment shape you, and the kind of survival strategies you had to adopt as coping mechanisms to deal with whatever situation you were faced with. And we as humans, we can look quite similar on the outside, but the survival situations that we face are mostly cultural and not just the physical environment. So the culture you grew up in and whatever kind of family environment, schooling environment, work environment, these all shape you very much. More so than whether you grew up in the Arctic or in the tropics or in the desert, although of course that also shapes you. But really it's the software that's even more important than the hardware when we're discussing survival here. So I want you to start to notice how much human survival varies around the globe. It varies enormously from country to country, continent to continent, but even more than that, even within the same country, and especially if you take a large, diverse country like America, there are so many different ways for humans to survive in America. It's staggering, and we'll start to give examples of some of those here in a minute, but you can already probably start to fill in some of the blanks yourself. So your personal survival situation creates huge blind spots in your psyche. It limits your ability to understand others. It limits your ability to grow, to succeed, and to transcend to higher levels. Because really what we're talking about here is when we're talking about personal development or spiritual development, we're talking about growing one's psyche. And to grow one's psyche, we have to look at the limitations and blind spots that are present within the psyche that hold us back. These are the obstacles. And also, as you were growing up, you encountered from your environment as you were struggling to survive, you incurred wounds and scars. Karma, samskaras, the Hindu traditions call it. And these stay with you and influence how you behave. They can be very corrupting. They can corrupt your desires, your goals, your ambitions in life, your fears. They can make you insecure in various ways. They can make you overreact emotionally to certain things. They can give you certain biases and predilections and aversions, and all of these fundamentally shape how your life unfolds. And if your life is unfolding in ways you don't like, with bad habits and addictions, and you keep struggling and spinning your wheels and not getting the kind of traction and success you want in your life, well, you have to look back and to see really what is sourcing that. And it's probably early childhood survival situations that you didn't quite fully know how to deal with, and you might have dealt with them in dysfunctional ways, unholistic ways, and then those became ingrained in your psyche, and now you still keep acting from that place. It's sometimes difficult to unteach yourself some of these bad habits you picked up, or certain assumptions about reality or about people or about society that was just a function of how you survived when you were younger. We tend to assume that humans have always lived sort of the same way, like that 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, humans lived basically like we do today. Not at all. When we're studying history in school, it doesn't really sink in. The teacher doesn't really teach us that. It's not merely that, the ancient Romans lived a certain way, the Egyptians lived a certain way, and then in the Middle Ages they lived a certain way, and during the Renaissance they lived a certain way, and the Chinese lived a different way than the Europeans, and etc. It's not just that. It's like when you're reading history and studying history, you have to really put yourself in the shoes of the people that were living in that culture, in that time, with that technology, with the epistemic limits that they had at that time, the limits of their understanding, the limits of their science, the limits of their religion that they were plagued with, whatever situation they were dealing with. Like, you have to really understand that to live 2,000 years ago was such a starkly different way of surviving than today. And even 100 years ago, survival was so different for your great-grandparents than it is for you today. The culture has changed, the language has changed, our understanding of mankind as a species has changed, our understanding of science has changed, even our understanding of religion. Today's Christians are not the same Christians of 2,000 years ago. They're completely different. And we don't appreciate that enough. And the survival challenges, of course, that our ancestors faced were completely different than what we face today. Of course, many things were similar. There are common patterns, but many things were very different. And even just your survival strategies as a kid growing up were very different from that of your parents. Just a single generation is actually very significant. But we tend to overlook all this, and we tend to just assume that, well, everybody just kind of grows up the same way. No, not at all. Kids today growing up in the digital environment with the internet, with video games, with virtual reality, with smartphones, right from the cradle, they have this stuff. It's a totally different environment than like when I was growing up, mostly in the 90s. And even there, I am fairly tech savvy because I grew up in a sort of era where technology was all around me. Computers, I was there for the early internet, the early video game, the rise of video games and cable TV and all these sorts of things. But I wasn't there, for example, for social media. I mean, I was there, but my mind was already formed. You see, the human mind, and really not just the human mind, but all animal minds work this way. They're extremely impressionable during that phase from birth to adulthood. And for humans, that's around 20 years old. Your mind is being cemented and set in stone. Stuff that is set in stone in the first 20 years of your life, that stays with you, and it becomes more and more difficult to change as you get into your 30s, 40s, and beyond. So how your mind is set, like drying concrete, in those first 20 years are absolutely crucial. And if the concrete has cracks in it as it's still wet and drying, if it has debris, leaves fall on it, twigs and branches, somebody comes and rides his bicycle through it, all those marks and things are going to be impressed and ingrained into that concrete for the rest of its existence. Now, of course, with humans, we're a little bit more malleable than that, but it's actually quite astounding how difficult it is to change the human mind once it's set after those first 20 years. It's pretty difficult. Possible, but difficult. It takes labor. All right, so now I want you to do this little visualization exercise with me. I want you to imagine how different you would be today if, for example, your father was a drug dealer when you were growing up. If you were raped by your father. If you were a Mormon growing up in a Mormon family, in a Mormon community. If you were gay or confused about your sexuality. Assuming you were. If you were bullied in school because you were ugly. If you were born in an Eskimo tribe, somewhere in the Arctic Circle. If you grew up in a foster home
with an expert, or let an expert file for you
without parents.
Intuit TurboTax Live.
Just try to imagine how that would change your very identity and sense of who you are in the world. We're not just talking about like, oh yeah, life would have been a little bit more difficult, or some circumstances in my life would be a little bit different. I would have had to adapt to that. No. What I'm trying to get you to understand here is that you would be a different person
Infinite flows, infinite soul, open the stargate. I like the stargaze, many
Imagine if, when you were young, you grew up with a chronic illness instead of like the healthy body that, let's assume, you have now or had in the past. Imagine how that would shape you if you grew up in a wheelchair. If you went to school, 12 years of school in a wheelchair. Imagine if you were a hot, pretty girl, and all the boys admired you and lavished attention on you, and even the adults told you how beautiful and cute you were from a young age, because you were just exceptionally pretty. You were just born that way. You got luck of the draw from the genetics lottery. Or if you grew up in a war zone, imagine how that shapes your psyche to grow up in a war zone, with bombs bursting around you as you sleep, with your father waking up in the middle of the night telling you that we have to get out of the house because a bomb might, blast through the roof. Then you got to get up and run, or struggle to find food in the morning because all the shops are closed or bombed. And as you walk into the bazaar, there's bullets flying around, and you gotta crawl to avoid the bullets. Imagine how that shapes your goals in life, your desires, your fears and insecurities, your political beliefs, your religious convictions. Imagine if you grew up in a small rural village with no internet access, no television, no music, no big grocery stores. Imagine if you grew up as a woman in Saudi Arabia. Imagine if you grew up in a royal family in a palace, and you had butlers serving you from golden plates with golden forks your whole life, driving you in Rolls Royces and such things. And your family groomed you to be part of the royal family, because they just expected you to fill that role.
I took my life, I had to steal it back from the contradiction, reality versus fiction, or maybe there's.
Imagine if you grew up seeing mystical visions as a child.
I think about this often. Got a lot of thoughts that I'll be taking.
It wasn't something you tried to do or even practiced. You didn't even meditate. You just, every time you went to sleep, you saw mystical visions. Even while you were awake at school, you would see mystical visions of weird entities and beings and aliens and things and angels and shit. Imagine how that would completely transform who you think you are, what you think reality is, and your relationship to it. And of course, this would isolate you from other children because they wouldn't see these visions. And the adults around you, they probably also don't see these visions. Even your parents might not have believed you when you told them that you saw these mystical visions, and they just told you that, oh, you're just imagining things, you have a hyperactive imagination. Maybe they even took you to a doctor, and the doctor maybe even put you on some antipsychotic medications, because the doctor, of course, a Western materialist doctor, doesn't believe in mystical visions. He thinks that's all nonsense, and he thinks that you're going crazy, and so he puts you on antipsychotics, and then those numb your visions down, but then they make you feel disconnected, and they don't make you feel like yourself anymore. And as a child, you don't know what's going on. You don't know whether to listen to these adults or not to listen to them. Maybe you start to think that maybe these adults are right. Maybe I do have a hyperactive imagination. Maybe something is wrong with me. Maybe I am going crazy. Maybe I am psychotic or whatever. And then it takes you a long time to figure out what's what.
Yo.
86, you know what it is. It's
So
the energy
humans
when
survive
anything
in very
exists. Make them
different
watch
ways,
like
yet
I'm
we
stuck up on their
judge
wrist, low
others
key, like I snuck up in this. Not
for
abusive, but I'm always making hits. Pull my heart up now,
how
really
they
getting
survive.
rich. You could have the money, I'm abundant as it gets.
Very judgmental
Massive
about the
making
survival
music, now I'm
strategy
really
for
in the
them.
mix. I've been chasing dreams like a fiend. If you
And that's
gotta feel
precisely
alive,
because
then you know just what I mean.
Our
Dreams of
own
trust.
survival strategy was so paramount in the shaping of who we are.
I get high off
that
the
how
thought of
we
turning
see
nothing into something. If
how
I
we see
don't get my
reality
fix,
itself,
then I
how we
find it hard to
define
function.
what
Dreams of
reality
trust.
is, was so deeply shaped by these things that it's difficult for us to even step outside of
trust.
who we are, because we just are that now. It's difficult for us to step outside of that and to see that somebody else had very different influences and had to deal with very different much more difficult survival situations, and therefore they had to adapt to those, and they had to become literally a different person. And to survive those situations, they literally had to see reality in a different way. To survive as a
Know that
woman
feeling when
in
you're down to
Saudi
the last few
Arabia
pills in your prescription?
literally
It's
requires that you
called
see
Red. But
reality
there's
in
good
a
news.
different
You
way
never have to stand in line at the
than
drugstore
if
again.
you're a woman
Try
in America.
Capsule, a new kind of pharmacy that
Otherwise,
takes
you
all the
can't
hassle
survive in
out
that
of getting your
situation.
prescriptions. Capsule
You
lets
might
you
get
manage your meds
beheaded.
from your phone. No lines,
is no
no
joke.
out of stocks, no missed doses, ever. We coordinate with your insurance, and our messengers hand deliver your prescriptions in a few hours.
So
for
be very
free.
careful
Just
about
pay your copay.
judging
Ready for a better
how
pharmacy?
other
Get
people
started in
survive.
just 15
You don't
seconds
know
at capsule.com. That's
situations they
capsule.com.
faced, what they had to do. You assume that, oh, well, they don't have to survive
Having
that
a
way. They can just
mattress
survive the way that I
sleeps hot
survived.
Is bad enough.
No,
But
don't
I
assume
feel the
that.
summer heat,
Because
and
if
I'm
they
pretty
adopted
much at
your
my
version
boiling
of
point.
reality,
That's
your
why I'm going to the
worldview,
Memorial Day sale at
your
Ashley
belief
Home Store.
system, your
Get
assumptions,
any
your
size mattress for the
principles, your
price of a
values,
twin
your
on select
fears, your
Ashley Sleep
insecurities,
mattresses, or get
and your
0% interest
goals
for
and
8
values,
years on
if
select
they adopted all
Tempur-Pedic and
those,
Beautyrest
they might have
Black
gotten
mattresses
beheaded
starting at
in the
$18 per month.
survival
Tap the banner to
situation that
find
they
your
were
own
in.
hot savings and blissfully cool sleep. Ashley Home Store. This is home. See store or ashleyhomestore.com for details.
Or they might have gotten raped. Or their parents might have hit them and abused them. You don't know. These are very common things that happen to millions of people. And they have to adapt to that, to survive through that. And a lot of that happens to children. We're talking about children that might be less than 10 years old. And those children, just think about how little a 10-year-old child understands about reality, and about society, and about the evils of the world, and about how to survive.
Are you ready for
When you
your
come into
mission?
this
Is
world,
what
you're
I
not
heard
given
them
a
say to me.
survival manual.
Incarnated into a physical body.
You have to
Yo,
make it
baby,
up
I
as you
started
go
from
along.
scratch. Forgot
And
about
if you're
my
lucky, you have
origin.
parents
Born
that
into a
can
world where
guide
the
you,
Buddha
who
was
are
the fortune.
wise,
So I
who
opened my
themselves have
eyes. The
mastered
first
the
thing that
art
I
of
find is
survival,
disruption
and they
makes me
can
suffer.
pass on
Blended
some
with
wisdom to you.
suicides, man, I can't believe my
But,
vision. The cancer has expanded. I've made
that's
my
often not the
decision.
case.
To heal it is the plan,
A lot of
man.
times,
The way you
parents are
began,
dysfunctional
raised up on the
themselves.
free
They don't know how to
land.
survive.
Yeah, my ass. See, we
The
ain't
way
free.
they
I don't
survive
agree,
no
man.
longer
Money,
works
titles,
in
and
the
power is
situation
what
that,
we
you know,
all seek.
that they're going
Ignorance
up, because now
devoured
there's
me,
a
but now
war.
I turn
When your
the
parents
other
were surviving,
cheek.
there might
So
not
the
have been a
Father's
war
design
in
and
your
healing
country.
all the
And
blind.
now,
Be
the
connected
parents
with your
that
soul
aren't
instead
raising
of
you in a
money
war
on your
zone,
mind. So ready or
they
not,
don't-
here I
they
come just
themselves
to
don't
remind
know
you. All
what to do to
materialistic
help you
things
as
cannot
a
define you.
child
So
to
let
figure
go.
out how to
Detach from
navigate
what's
that
outside you
situation.
and just know these cats is trying to bind you, but break free and
Your whole
see
life is
that
riding
you
on
are
it. This is a
another
life
me.
and death
And
matter.
maybe
It's
if
not a
we
joke.
could stop getting tipsy and realize that there's other things that we should focus
And I
on.
want you to
Your
especially pay
pride is
attention to
stopping
how
you from reaching
we're not
corazon.
just
So
talking about
get
physical
corazon.
survival
Time to
here.
realize the
Pay
truth
attention to how
that you
survival
couldn't know
shapes
through the time that
the
you were in
mind,
you,
the
but that
psyche, the
has
beliefs,
changed
the
straight up
worldviews,
and
your
rearranged.
morality,
So
your
forget about the
values.
fame, instead just heal the pain so the
That's the
rain
really
could stop falling
important
on your brain. So the range from the truth, man, it's
Here's
so
an example
insane, it's a shame.
with Hitler.
Honestly, look
So,
how it's gotten
who
me
Hitler
rapping
was
about this, but I ain't alone.
and what he
Spotted
did
me. Are
as
you
an
too
adult
blind to see
was
that this
merely
was
the
full of
reflection of his
corruption,
mind.
addicted to eruptions, persuade us
And
to
Hitler's mind
destruction?
was
I'm
merely a
fucking
reflection of the
tired of these
survival
demons that be
challenges
scheming
he
in my
faced during
genius
his
mind
youth,
when I'm
during
spitting.
the
I
first
be
10,
ripping to
20
keep
years of
you
his
in
life.
line, so never say that I don't care. The love
And it
is
can be
right
useful
there,
to actually
waiting for
pick
you
up a
to
biography
receive
of
it.
Hitler
I know it
and
ain't
read it.
fair. Demons in your mind deceiving, stop you from breathing.
And I don't
But take
mean
another fresh
his
air, get
autobiography. I
there.
mean a
Meet me
biography
halfway
written
and
by
I'll
an
be right
objective,
here.
sort of neutral
We'll all be
historian.
smiling when it'll become so clear. You are my
when you're
brother,
reading an
so take
autobiography, it's
another
being
look,
filtered
bro.
through his own
In your
mind already.
reflection of the mirrors in your mind flow, you know I be planting seeds of knowledge into your noggin, getting rid of all the bullshit propagandas, and I'm trying
his
I'm done
biography.
having so much
But, I
fun,
mean, his
like a
autobiography,
kid on
you
a
can-
mic
you
soaring
can-
towards
you
the
can-
sun.
you can
And
get a
I
lot of
don't
value
worship
reading
anyone, I just
a
keep
good
it real,
historian's
cause the
biography.
wisdom that's within only you, nobody can steal.
I did some
Giving
of
your
that.
body
It
the
gave me a lot
chills
of
right through your
insight into
speakers. I spill 2 minutes, 46
his
seconds, you're
behavior
hearing me still.
and his
Shouldn't that
ideology.
prove that the things
Very
that I'm
illuminating.
saying were true? And I'm telling you that I am no
How
better than
Hitler
you. Realize the
participated
true
in World War
potential
I,
of what you
or
can
World War
become.
II,
Raise the
before he started
frequencies
World
of
War
your
II,
minds. The
or
suffering
World
is
War I.
done. The suffering is done.
interesting
Look
to
around,
read
my
what role
brother,
he
the
played in
revolution has
World War I,
begun.
and how he performed there and how that shaped his psyche. And that wasn't the only thing that shaped his psyche. After that, I mean, I'm not going to go into all the details, but if you want, you can read the biography and you'll start to understand what I'm alluding to. So those early experiences shaped his mind, which then reshaped all of Europe and the rest of the world, and really human history. That's how significant this stuff is. Now, it's easy for us, well, not even that easy. See, I was going to say, it's easy for us to see Hitler's situation because we're not Hitler. So it's easy when you're looking from outside, it's easier to have perspective and to see things objectively, neutrally, without self-bias. But really, even for most people, even seeing Hitler is not so easy, because most people just see him as evil or whatever. And I'm not saying he was a good guy or anything. I'm not trying to whitewash Hitler here or to make excuses or rationalizations for what he did.
It's the power of the brain. Versus the power
I'm
of
being
the
very
money.
neutral about it.
Trying to stay in the game.
I'm not trying to judge, but the point being is that most people aren't even able to see that what Hitler did was simply a reflection of survival challenges he faced in his youth. See, just to even see that will change how you see Hitler, how you see World War II,
Bring it real low.
how you judge
Bring it up.
him and how you judge others.
Uh-oh, guess who? Yes, Philip, I got
But now the
something to
real
confess
work is
to.
applying this sort of
I've been
logic to
getting
your own
the
self.
rest new. Sleep is old, but the rest is new.
Let's do
And the
that.
rest of you can get
What are the
tested
core
too.
survival
You're on drugs,
challenges
thinking
that
you
shaped
the best,
your
my
mind?
dude. Better
That's the
check
key
your
question.
shoes. Who you stepping to? I kill everything.
So here's the
what's left is
exercise.
for you. But
I want you to remember
never
all the way
kept it
back
the
to your
truth.
childhood,
702
to your
when I
early
rap in the
years.
booth everywhere that I go, my heart's never
And it
gonna move. I
really
was raised in this house, now I'm raising the roof.
helps
And I said
to
it, I
really
meant
go
it,
back
I'm showing
early.
you proof.
I
Like
mean,
poof, magically
when you were just
blow up
learning
like
how to
a fuse.
eat,
I amuse what you fools are just constantly
how to
losing. Not a
walk.
contest, but I'ma throw concerts
The
and
earliest
concerts
memories
so
you
crazy
have.
you can't comprehend. More often than bullets shot off in Compton, where my aunt is captain.
And try to
fire
recall the
department.
survival challenges that you
Alarming like
faced.
smoking apartments. Damn,
you
I'm just here
faced
to do
at that
damage.
time.
You just employee because
And,
you cannot manage
get a
the fact
sheet
that I'm
of
rapping
paper,
and making this happen. You can't kill my
notepad,
dreams
and
or
list them
imagine
out.
assassins. Yeah, it's a
Start
scary thought. Philip Poppin' on
doing
the
a little
doctor, but it
brainstorm
goes
here.
shot like K-Dot.
What did you struggle with?
You a clock or a Glock is not
And
time
start
for
with
you.
even
Shoot
the
from my
very
spot. Walk down these
basic
streets,
stuff
now I'm
like
running the block.
food.
Used to watch my
Remember
TV,
how
now
you
something to
struggled
watch.
just to put
Nothing was
food
the
in your
same
mouth.
from then to now.
The
And I know
majority of
we
it
make
ended
just
up on your
when and
shirt.
how.
I remember when I was like,
Power of the
even when
brain.
I was like 7 years old, I can remember, eating sandwiches, and I would always get food like everywhere on my shirt. I remember I had to like buy new shirts all the time because they would get like mayo stains on it, grease stains and stuff from ketchup and mustard and burger juice and whatever else dripped on it. And it took me like a couple of years. I remember like from age 7 to maybe age 9, it took me a couple of years to learn just how to eat so that I don't get food like all over my pants and my shirts. And that was a struggle. And see, today unless I'm doing this recording here for the purposes of educating you, I haven't even thought about this stuff for like 30 years. And so you just forget about it. And you probably forgot about it too. Like you probably forgot about these very basic things you struggled with. Just even maintaining your temperature was a challenge. Figuring out how to keep yourself cool or how to keep yourself warm. Depending on whether you were in the winter time, the summertime. I remember I would get these bad sunburns because I just wasn't aware of the sun's heat. And I would stay out in the summer, at the lake or something, and it was scorching hot, and I would get these terrible sunburns. Or even like I remember it took me years just to learn to wear warmer clothes when it was cold outside. Like it seems so obvious today. now as an adult, it seems so obvious. If it's cold outside, grab a coat. But like that wasn't even obvious to me. And And like the family situation I was growing up with, you know, we had certain financial difficulties when I was growing up. A lot of times we just didn't have money. Like I would need a coach. I would need just like
look at the way I
like
done landed. I came from a faraway planet. You asked, you
I would need that,
demanded.
but
The
I knew,
Grim
for example,
Reaper
that
like Billy and Mandy.
you were out
A
of
black
money
hoodie, hard
certain
shorts
times
to
of the
the
year.
party.
It was
With my
weird. You know,
man's Pleiades,
my
you
financial
got
situation,
him
my family
set.
had a big influence on me. I'll talk about that a
Introducing
little more
Pleiades is wisdom
here
on the beat,
later in this episode,
making
but, like,
sacred
it was
geometry
very
look so
kind of
obsolete.
rocky.
Discreet with what I speak
Some
because
parts
it
of the
is
year we
you.
had lots of money.
Avoiding distractions and now my soul's complete.
vacations and
Hopefully the
extravagant
people
dinners and
notice
stuff
me
like that.
through all my
And then other parts
poetry.
of the year we had
Open with the
no
potency,
money
I'm
at all. They
spitting
would turn
knowledge
off
globally.
electricity.
I'm soulfully
And we had
spitting
to
all
use
of
the
this
candles.
Roman speak mythology, so people like to call me Greek. I'm speaking on technique that makes the beat complete. My lyrics are concrete, so keep them on repeat.
My family
Spiritual,
would
this
waste
is
that money on
lyrical.
like an extravagant
This is
dinner.
everything you
but there'd
wanted
be
like
nothing
a
left for just
miracle.
a jacket.
This is spiritual, this is lyrical.
Ass backwards.
This
But
is
anyways,
everything
that's
you
the
wanted like a
situation
miracle.
I grew up in, and you better believe that shaped me very
Let's take a
significantly.
look at the moon, blow up the ceiling.
It shaped my
Rhymes
attitude
going
towards
chilling like
money
ammonia.
and
Count up these stars while I tell these stories. Fire just the
life.
trumpets, Even when the mic is off, you know I be
towards
going hard. I develop the skill to kill like an electric ill. Give you
Think about
electric
sexuality.
feels through magnetic fields, electromagnetic
sexuality
compared to
was
us
formed
other
over
rappers.
the first 20
Pathetic,
years of your
forget
life.
it. Just bump this on
And what
repeat, you won't
struggles
regret
existed
it.
there,
It's like
maybe your
you
sexual
do 100
identity,
years, you're digging
maybe
in
feeling
genetics.
guilty about sex because you were
Observe my
moralized by
artwork,
your
moving through the
fundamental
universe, a
Christian
clockwork, the verse with all the words that I disperse, and verse the verbs that I insert. My music is created to immerse the collective population can't assert themselves cause of current mental health. Got them feeling overwhelmed. Provide a new parallel so that people can excel. Rebel against the system that is hell. Recognize that this human life is for yourself. Now follow me as I lead you into another realm. This is spiritual.
I don't know
This
what
is lyrical.
your situation
This is
was.
everything you
Think
wanted
about how
like
that
a
influenced
miracle.
your views of
This is
sexuality.
spiritual. This is lyrical.
with you today.
This is everything you wanted like a
Sexually
miracle.
My
Maybe
style is
make you very sexually open and liberal.
just staying married to the game. These other rappers get divorces. I don't force it, flow like forces. Illest verses, illest chorus. I have horror seeing all. A young body, but my mind is
Survival
like that
challenges
of a
like just
senior.
hurting
No
yourself or
Alzheimer's.
bruising
Remember
yourself
killing
physically. Like, I
tracks.
remember
It's
when
my
I was
first
younger,
time in Johnson
I always had, like,
since I came out of the womb. And they gon' stay in tune even when I'm in the
Because I would
zone.
like
Just
ride
like
the
a
bike and I
pharaoh.
would
You are what you manifest. Ego equals the
fall off the
intellect.
bike and
Architect
scrape
of
my
the
knees
alphabet.
and
Speaking
this and that,
Arabic
and
just so that I can
would always be
reflect.
injuring myself.
The presence of
bruising
the
myself
president
against
is
something on a
evident. The
skateboard or
government can
whatever.
represent the collective resonance, and its regression is putting us in depression. This topic needs some attention. I don't even want to finish the sentence. But here's another lesson on how society is deception. They idolize perfection, minimal comprehension, a brainwashing method, subliminal suggestion, deprivation of connection through a new invention that you need in your possession. Excessive. And I have a question. Does listening to this bring you aggression?
Think about very dangerous situations you face. Maybe with strangers that were trying to pick you up, or with automobiles, with bicycles, with skateboards. Dangers
From
in your
pyramids to Buddha
environment.
statues, however you absorb the knowledge, I forgot you. Young Messiah's on a mission that's bigger than life. Choose to live within today so you can sleep at night with no figures that try to frighten
situations
you.
when you
Just
cried.
let these words
Think
give
about
you
all those
light
times you
and
cried when you were
truth. Open
young,
your heart and your
teenagers.
mind, use your tools. Give it to
Zero
you when it's got physical. It's just a rise
What
of
were you
hang
crying about?
and keep cool.
I mean, it was difficult. Think about
Just
it.
wake
Even if you grew up
up.
in
The
a nice
multiverse is
neighborhood,
within you. Everything has been you.
parents
Don't
were
discontinue.
wealthy.
This cosmic consciousness reaching you while you're
Even all the stuff
conscious.
you wanted, you still
Ancient
cried about
knowledge is
stuff.
transferred into spiritual logic. It is common,
was
you've
that?
forgotten
How did
that
that
you're
shape you?
awesome. Your spirit can't be put
But
inside a
lessons like that
coffin.
imprint
Broaden
into
your peripherals. Meditate with energetic
suffering
minerals. These
that you
syllables are
incurred when you were
intervals, so
young.
don't take them so literal.
And
Be your
very
own
impressionable.
individual.
That left
Unimprovisional, be original.
Some
It is
scaras
pivotal
or
that you
wounds
realize
in
that
your
you are
psyche.
in control. Only you can bestow change inside your episode.
which are probably
You're not
still
alone inside this world that's
compensating
cold. I'm trying to reach you through these lyrics that I make inside my studio. I
Think about the
speak through
challenge
my
of learning
microphone to
language
lay it through your stereo.
I mean, learning
Perform a
language
symphony
was so
that I
difficult.
compose.
Now we just use it, it's easy.
The tornado of
Effortless,
tomorrow
you
is
don't
in
even
your
think about it.
control.
Remember how difficult it was to use
This is
language
spiritual. This is lyrical. This is everything you wanted like a miracle. This is spiritual.
5, 6 years
This is
old.
lyrical.
My parents
This is
watching
everything you wanted like a miracle.
with the little arrow, you know, the arrows. It wasn't a digital one; it was an analog one. And I couldn't figure out what the arrows meant. I didn't understand the arrows.
Curiosity Stream has thousands of documentary films and shows available on demand
while to
on
figure that
any
out.
device. We're the Netflix for nerds, the Hulu
take
for
it so
history
for granted.
buffs,
Or learning
the Disney
mathematics. I
Plus
remember I
for the
struggled a lot
scientist in us. There
in,
sure are a lot of streaming services,
the
aren't
first
there?
3-4 years
Curiosity Stream is the one you
school just to
definitely
figure out what
need
the
if you're the
hell
type to
mathematics
nature
was.
dock and chill. If you're an armchair astronaut, if you prefer
Or learning
physics
other
to psychics,
aspects of life,
or perhaps you know a
struggling through
precocious
school. Think of how much struggle you
Go to
went through in school.
CuriosityStream.com to learn more
That
and
whole
sign up
ordeal,
today.
12 years of that shit. Or the struggles that came with socializing with children
Got my vibe like
of your own age. And how difficult that
Living
might have
my
been for
life,
you, how
got my
traumatic that
vibe
might have
like-
been for you, depending on what kind of environment you were in. Maybe you were bullied, or maybe you bullied others.
I'm up there, baby.
It all depends. And how that shaped you.
Yeah, man. I'm
Remember
way
getting in
elated,
trouble,
vibration
all the rules you
elevated,
broke,
bad vibes
all the
dissipated
intentions you
without
got,
the libation.
all
No
the
chaser.
scolding
I
you
ain't
got
on the
from your
chase for more
parents for
paper.
being too rowdy, or from
Only
your teachers, or
destinations
from your
will hold
principal,
my
or
own
whatever
greatness.
punishments they
I don't
gave you.
project Nathan, owning my own
Like how that
fakeness.
affected
After the transmutation, reflecting illumination. Discipline and patience,
struggle of
creating
fitting
my
in.
good graces through intense
Being cool.
concentration built from years of meditation.
Making sure your
Abundant
peers
fascination,
thought you
replacing the
were normal and not
frustration.
weird.
Building on the
They
inner
accepted
planes
you
with
and
beings from
approved you.
different time
That whole
spaces.
game you
Swimming
played.
on the wave of ascended golden ages.
You might have
My life
played it
propelled the dog
excellently,
so
or
the
you might have played it
sage
very
you can
poorly
save
and that
it.
very much
Master the art of integrating
game.
celebration in every moment.
like-
Giving praises for every
Think about academic achievement and
Spinal column
what
generating
significant
energy
role
so
that played in
sacred
your
that
life.
atmospheric
Good
placement is
student,
where
bad
I'm gonna
student,
take it
how you
on.
felt about your own sense of intelligence and knowledge and self-esteem related to that, or your struggles with sports, fights with your family. Think of all those. What were those about, and how did those shape you? Rebelling against your parents, or conforming to your parents. Whichever one, doesn't matter. It shaped you just the same.
They said the sky was the
About trying
limit.
to
I'm
gain
glad I
approval
didn't
or love
listen.
from your
Cause now
parents
I'm
and
way
friends.
up high and
Think
I
of how
see
much
the
that
stars
shaped.
glisten. I'm a light worker with sense of
Divorce, if
earth
there
with
was
a
a divorce
special
in your
mission.
family,
I'm trying to
that
raise
was
the
a huge
vibe and help
influence
the
on you.
planet reach ascension. Astral
Think
projection
about how
from the
your
third
identity was
into the fourth
forged.
dimension. Climbing the ladder
did you
of
figure out
consciousness.
who
I just
you
keep
were?
on stepping. Evil forces try to dim my light, but I keep on shining. I was underground. I felt the pressure return me to a
You probably
diamond.
played
I'm
with
still
different
rising. I'm still
identities.
climbing. I'm
Middle
never
school
high
and
enough.
high school.
If there's a list to the top, tell them to sign me up.
friends
See, I was
as
way
well.
at the bottom and I was
And
feeling
how you had
stuck.
to
I
navigate and
elevated my
negotiate
mind, now
identity with them.
things are looking up.
Various
Meditation got me
interests that you
surfing through
explored
all these
and how those
vibrations.
influenced you and
Escaping
how you
from the
struggled with
matrix is
different
my only
hobbies and
destination.
things. Some
Verbal
you loved,
affirmations,
some
I
you
wake
hated,
up
some
and
you were
feel
frustrated
amazing.
by.
All this cannabis I'm blazing got me rising off the pavement. I'm up.
Remember how challenging it was just to learn different concepts. Or the struggle of being lazy or disciplined. You struggled with that, disciplining yourself. Or being bored. Just think about how that might have shaped you, being bored.
It feels great to be flying up in the air again, and I ain't arrogant. I'm just wise by comparison, cause I was dying slow, vibing low as you could ever dig. Turned out to be a blessing, sent life abundant with evidence. If every day's a sunny day, then how you learn a lesson.
Maybe your family was secular
extra
or
bright, so it's
scientific
more impressive.
or
Live from the
atheistic, and then
heart,
that shaped
divine
you just
sight
as
with
much
pure
as the
intention.
religion
The
would
God
affect
inside
you.
my reality reflects His
about various
presence. Let's just say I
philosophical
feel like I might
questions
float away.
when you were
East
younger.
Coast raised, but I be in
What
the
is life?
Golden
What is
State.
death?
Jay
Think about the
West
first
sent
time
me a
that
J
you
from the West that got me faded. Walking
became
galactic
conscious of the fact that
highways,
you're gonna
hitching
die,
rides on a
whether your
spaceship.
parents were gonna die, and how
Moving
that
lightly
affected you.
towards the center of creation. One love, the 26 for the assist with escaping. All these different ways to say
Debates
I'm
and
always
disagreements you
feeling
had with your
great.
parents,
And no matter when I'm
elders,
facing, man, ain't nothing
and
left to
friends and
say.
colleagues. Mentors who influenced you in positive ways, negative ways. Maybe you had a mentor who misled you. Music you listened to, health problems you had, lack of money, or an abundance of money in your family situation. other kinds of family dysfunctions you struggled with, early romances you had, pregnancy if you had that early, abortion if you had that early, being denied or rejected for things. Maybe you were rejected for a sports team, maybe you were rejected for an early job position, maybe you were rejected for a school or a university.
These heavenly, blessedly writing these bars are so cleverly, drop it so heavily, hit with precision. I hold my head steadily, you're not ahead of me. Thought you was flame, but you're dead in the head of me. I do it pleasantly, I got the flow to the hook up the future while I spit it presently. Certified rapper, the fuck is you checking me for? When they come knock at the door, they hear this flame and they asking for more. Chop the flow up like some gore, covered in red while I pour, but cover the four. Your bar steady leaving me for. Soon as you're done, all you hearing is stories, but I got this fire galore. After encores, but I got high and I'm slumped in a half on the floor. Wait, if you ain't noticed, we don't find some bonus, get out some shit every day. Young Pleiades and type bands on the track, and we not stopping music until we get paid. It's taking off slowly, but we on the come up and making a name while we keeping our faith. Expand your horizons, we spending the light while lyrically fighting and saving the day. Pleiadian man with an alien plan to enlighten the people in every way, so we taking this thing, blow it down like a fan and expelling the haters that stand in our way. You ain't with the shits, I don't know what to say, so you wasting my time, please get out of my face. Pleiades and type bands, you come from outer space, you look like a disgrace to the alien race.
And then
music literally influences how people feel.
Fill in the blank.
The content of your lyrics induce thoughts and emotions within the listener. So would you rather inflate your ego and make others feel less, or spread positivity and make others feel better? Forever, switching up flow like the weather.
And then
remember, your soul is as light as a feather.
Fill in that blank with what first pops into your brain.
A realm of pleasure beyond measure.
In fact, it's better if it's a couple of
Together,
things.
we will raise energy centers. Summon my chakra and flow like a salsa. Icons of these balls that are flowing like water. I'm sharper than all of these monsters. I conquer my mantra as out of a cause from alter mindset. When I am touched with the finest rhyming with all these lyrics, the finest likeness of the ancient Osiris. Find us looking for answers inside us. Think that I might just slaughter the game in politeness. All of this knowledge is priceless. Most of these humans are sightless, so I'm reciting all this enticing enlightenment. We have arisen, we're following our intuition, translating the vision through rhythm. ET on a mission to raise the human conditions, fit of wisdom with the rhythm of addiction. Thinking, ticking time, imprisoning mankind. Why does nobody learn how to open their mind? Realign with the divine inside, inclined to find lines in this life at night. I am looking at moonlight to ignite the light. I am looking for insight, like the Bible. I'm archetypal, I'm a disciple of this life cycle. I'm a fucking archangel, call me Michael. Listen to the music I am making on a vinyl. I know why you're in denial of our rivals. You don't gotta do anything to ensure survival. Pleiades and high bands, leaving on a high note. Meditate, replenish, energy spiral.
The less successful they were, probably the more pessimistic and depressed and conservative and sort of coming from a wounded victim mindset your responses will be.
More career pathways, more job opportunities when you graduate. At Turo Nicecast, you'll receive so much more than a degree. Get the attention you deserve, a tailored plan for success, and the resources you need to take the next step toward landing your dream job.
Whichever is the opposite of your sex.
Now or text NYC
so if you're a woman, then for you it's men are blank. And if you're a man, it's women are blank.
933-933-1502.
And don't overthink it too much. You wanna kind of do this
have been
from your intuition.
But you can help make things better for yourself and others
There's
by
no
donating
right or wrong
plasma
answer.
at CSL
It's just
Plasma.
how you feel
when
about
you
it.
become a new CSL Plasma donor,
go
you
with
can
your
make
gut.
over $1,000 this month. And your donations
Happiness
help create
is
therapies
blank.
for people with rare and serious diseases. It's a win-win. Help make things
Fill it
brighter
out.
when you start donating today. Visit your local CSL
Maybe you
Plasma
think
center and make
happiness
over
is unattainable.
$1,000 this month.
Or
CSL
happiness
Plasma. Good for
is
you.
love,
Great for
or
life.
happiness is
Compensation
sex,
varies by
or
location and
happiness
is subject
is
to change.
alcohol, or happiness is getting good grades, or happiness is having dinner with the table at the dinner table with the family, the whole family there.
I am Rico
What
King,
is happiness to you?
and this is God
Chances
Body.
are that's been shaped very much by how you
You
grew
are
up,
God Body, you are God
how you survive.
A body of God, a body of God.
In some sense, you equate happiness with some sort of successful survival. However, you define successful survival for you. And all of us define successful survival in different ways because,
See, I know you're dying for
of
a peace of
course,
mind. Just let the spirit get you drunker than some
we had to
red
survive in
wine.
very unique ways.
Just let that motherfucking
So, of course, the
rise
next
to the top chakra,
fill in
nigga.
the
Now
blank
you know
is
you got it.
success
My
is
nigga, that's
blank.
Kundalini. Anything that you imagine, you got it. Cause
What
you
is
a
success?
genie. Red light, yellow light, green
And where
light.
do your
go.
definition of success come
Music
from?
for the chakra, can you
Think about
feel it
that.
in your soul?
What
This
books,
is
magazines,
God flow. Get your
stories that you
energy
heard from your
in.
parents,
Free
or
king
role
with a
models,
realist in the
parents,
room.
teachers in
Red
your
light,
life
yellow light,
that
green
you
light,
emulated
go.
or looked yourself to that generated your ideas and success. Next is money is blank.
This is law of attraction, magnetism and action.
Sex
just live
is
to your
blank.
satisfaction. All of us can't be preachers, so some of us pistol packing.
Science or religion is blank.
And the Mac, and it's all a part
Whichever
of the rhyme
one.
and the Maya. We all acting. Life is the Titanic, my nigga, and you're the captain. Yeah, it's destined to sink, but it's power in what you think. And time is just an illusion. Your life will pass in a blink. But spirit lives on forever. You fly in an angel feathers. Do better if you know better. But it's all
Government
good.
is
Nothing's
blank.
bad. Even Lucifer
And
used to roll
finally,
with God in the jag.
I am blank.
Even evil was an angel who said he would be a rebel and change his name to the devil. And wisdom's like an arcade game, nigga.
Actually, I
It's
should
levels.
probably add one more in there.
I did the doors full of devils. They got rap music, cocaine,
Humans are
strippers,
blank.
and heavy metal. They got Michael Jackson chilling with
This
Hitler
reveals
and
to you some very fundamental
Mandela.
views you have.
But that is just my perception. You are lucid dreaming. This is inception.
early
I go
survival
hard as
situation.
erection. This is lethal injection. To
I'm going to keep
dissipate the
going here, but I
deception.
encourage you to really
Niggas a lesson.
pause this
Teflon
and
flow.
spend
It's energetic
a good
protection.
10,
I'm trying to
20,
open
30
your
minutes
mind and elevate
just
your
working on this
perception.
exercise
Just
right
let
here.
it go.
It will
Red
reveal a lot.
light, yellow light, green light, go.
I gotta keep going.
Music
So,
for the chakra, can you feel it in your
key
soul?
question
This
here is, how
God
did
flow,
early
your
survival
energy
shape
and
who you
soul.
are today?
Free kings
I want you to especially notice all of your likes and dislikes, how those were shaped, where they come from, all of your beliefs, convictions, principles, and pet theories, and firmly held opinions.
I think I'm God. You think it's evil.
Your world
and the spirit gets me higher than some sour diesel. You think
want
that's
you
a
to
trick?
notice your
Well, nigga,
morality,
get a load of this. I think you're God
your
too, but right now you
judgments,
just acting like
and
a
the things you
bitch.
hate.
See, really, it's common sense that nothing is really
Notice
separate
the
from
source of
anything
that.
that exists. I'm just a young Jesus with a Buddha flow,
And how
I
it
cherish
came
every
about
moment cause my
as a
life is
function of
beautiful.
survival and how it serves
Sometimes I wonder
survival.
what I do this for. All the magic
See,
in this
it's not
world,
merely
what
that
I'm
you
making
have a
music
morality
for.
or that you hate
But
something
I do it to
just
inspire
arbitrarily.
and light a
You
fire.
never hate something arbitrarily.
Black, white,
You never
old, young
judge
to
something
admire.
arbitrarily.
Can make
You
these
never
rap
just have
niggas bow
a moral
down to
system
the Messiah.
arbitrarily.
Watch the
It's always
guy
in
mix it up
response,
like
in
some
reaction to
jambalaya.
something
You are
such that it
watching
helps
King
you to
Kong
survive
climb the
in whatever
empire.
situation
Godzilla breathing
you were
flame,
in.
setting the city on fire. And most these rappers is clowns for hire. We should douse them in gasoline and set them on fire.
And again,
make
remember,
s'mores with the
it doesn't
flames.
just help you to
These
survive
niggas is lame,
physically.
they bringing shame to the game.
It
They
helps
selling
you to
soul for
survive
the
as a
fame. Acknowledge
psyche,
none
as
of
an
the pain.
ego.
Trying to sell you the glory of gangs and cocaine. But I hope you
So
never
don't
be
just
a
relate
thug.
these things back
And I hope you
to
never
physical
have to sell
survival.
fucking drugs. And maybe that's lame. But I'm just trying
As
to take
your
away your
psyche
pain.
accretes,
Remove the chains from your
as your psyche
motherfucking
develops
brain.
certain
The
likes and
ground
dislikes and
railroad, I'ma run the
aversions and
wasteland.
predilections
Carry
and
until it's
beliefs
gone. I
and
show you
convictions and
niggas the way.
principles and
After the
judgments and
darkest
morality,
night, then
these
comes
things
brightest
create
day.
a sort of
Money don't
an
make a
object
man,
of their
just make
own.
your money
All of these are
pray.
sorts of
Just keep your faith in the
amorphous,
God's backs and
conceptual,
they make it
abstract
safe.
things which don't
Red
seem like
light,
physical
green light,
objects
go.
that require surviving the way that a physical body does, the way that a physical object might. But once these things start to cohere together into a psyche or an ego mind, this becomes a sort of an object of its own, which then takes on a life of its own, and it needs to survive, even more so than the body itself. It's like a system. It's a system of meanings and interpretations. It's your mind. This is the ego mind. We're talking about the origins and birth of the ego mind. And your ego mind was not just born when you were 3 years old and you realized I exist. That was an important milestone for you. But your ego mind really was born in the first 20 years of your life by accreting more and more of this. I want you to notice your political and economic philosophy, your sexual identity, your views of men and women, your social behaviors and tendencies and attitudes towards other people, your career, your strengths, weaknesses, fears, and insecurities. Especially, let's underscore fears and insecurities. Fear and insecurity only comes from survival struggles. If you didn't have any survival struggles, you would have no fears or insecurity. And you got plenty of them. So you got to spend some serious time looking at those and where they came from, and what those are about, where they were sourced from, what they were in reaction to, and what their coping mechanisms for.
I am the demon with angels, done bricked on my halo, got shooters on payroll, team better lay low,
also, your defense mechanism. How do you protect yourself? Your values, your life philosophy, we might say. All of us, even if we don't explicitly call ourselves philosophers, we all have a life philosophy. Like maybe your philosophy is that, hey, you know, I'm not going to work too hard, I'm just going to sort of coast through life. Path of least resistance. Or maybe your philosophy is that I gotta work hard and I gotta wake up on time every morning and, you know, otherwise bad stuff will happen. Maybe that's your life philosophy. Or maybe your life philosophy is just, take it one day at a time. Or maybe your life philosophy is, I gotta plan 30 years ahead. Or bad stuff will happen.
My third eye open just to ease your mind. Please don't make me squeeze and try to bleed your spine. Feeling like a zombie, I'm eating mine. So
I want you to even notice seemingly trivial and mundane things like the kind of food you eat, the kind of books you read, the kind of media you consume, the kind of work you do. How all of this was shaped by early survival. The way you react to strangers, how social you are, and how you socialize, even the facial expressions you make when you are dealing with social situations. The muscle tension in your body, your darkest thoughts. What kind of darkest thoughts do you have, and how were those shaped by early survival challenges? Your dreams, the kind of dreams you have when you go to sleep, the kind of nightmares you have, what kind of nightmares do you have, what are those about? And how were they sourced by something like a survival challenge earlier in your life? And then also your dreams in the more sort of aspirational sense, like your highest goals, your highest dreams for your life. How were those shaped? How you handle money? Are you stingy and frugal? Or are you very wasteful with your money? And what is that in response to? Are you emulating the money behaviors of your mother, your father? Or are you rebelling against their behaviors and you do the opposite? So like maybe your father wasted a lot of money, so now you are very conservative with money. Or maybe your father wasted a lot of money and so do you, because you're copying him. It can be both ways. Even how you dress, consider that.
Raise the vibration, save the generation.
Style of dress you consider appropriate, like and dislike.
Every soul that wakes, know it's a celebration.
And what you guilt yourself for.
Things is on the way now, going different places, seeing different faces. We can't lose the hope, this life is what you make. All the highs and lows, no, we just gonna embrace them.
Where did that come from?
Existence is amazing.
Had to take a look inside with my spirit as the guide.
So what I want you to notice
as we rise from the surface to the sky.
Very little of it was
now my body just a host, Holy Ghost. Switch perspectives through the DMT, smoking to
and notice, all of the above constitutes basically who you are.
Like a dragon, and I've only made a fraction on this planet. Hard to
erase all that stuff I just mentioned, that entire list, from your mind. What is left of you? You're going to be unrecognizable as a human being, as a persona, as a psyche, as an ego mind. You won't recognize yourself. You'll look the same in the mirror, let's say, but everything about you that you hold as the most important is going to be gone. You're going to be completely hollowed out.
Make y'all understand it's for the fans, I just the bands, it's all a part of bigger plan.
Raise the vibration, save the generation. Airing out the ball, embrace the ventilation. Every soul that wakes, know it's a celebration.
All these things about ourselves as like
things is on the way now, going different places, seeing different faces. We can't lose the hope, this life is what you make. All the highs and lows, no, we just gonna embrace them.
Flying by the seat of your pants just trying to survive.
Waking up the minds of the youth that seek to be a light in dark past. Turn new stones over for future brightness. All we ever wanted was this life. We spoke it to existence. Now we lived it up and love in this beautiful life we live in. So follow us into the light.
Not as conscious as you think you are about who you are and where who you are came from and why you are who you are. The mind is very good at rationalizing to itself that, well, I'm Christian and I have a certain moral system and I'm frugal with money and I'm conservative or I'm liberal for these very good reasons. I'm a liberal because I value social justice, or I'm a conservative because my parents are conservative and I value their traditions and all that, and I really value my ancestors and all that. But really,
drive you crazy. Never let the darkness blind me, no matter however hazy, man. Just keep it vibing and marijuana prescribing, inscribing my will within me. My love for music, goodbye to your
backwards rationalizations
embrace it, the levitation, that patience and work hard, uniting cooperation.
Raise the vibration, save the generation. Airing out the bull, embrace the ventilation. Every soul that wakes up, it's a celebration.
About making changes to your life.
Good things is on the way, going different places, seeing different faces. We can't lose the hope, this life is what you make it. All the highs and lows, no, we just gon' embrace them.
The more we change, the better results we can potentially get. Now, of course, we can change things for the worse, but we're assuming to avoid that trap.
You feel it when hear the lyrics through all of the highs and lows.
That you can change things for the worse.
Like rose from out the stone,
don't overlook that possibility. But assuming that you're being wise about it and you're changing things about yourself in a beneficial manner, be more effective, be more successful, more productive, more happy, and whatever else, round the edges of your psyche. Then the more you change about yourself, the more change you will get, the more positive change you will get. Right? But notice that if you're unwilling to carefully examine and change all of these things that I just listed above
save the generation.
About yourself,
if you're not really willing to change you
every soul that wakes, no, it's a celebration. Then
things is on
how
the way,
can you expect to get any significant, meaningful change in your life?
Faces. We can't lose the hope, this life is what you make it. All the highs and lows, no, we just gonna embrace them.
So, if you really want a serious improvement in the quality of your life, then you have to recognize, connect the dots, that means there has to be a serious change about you, who you are.
With plant-based
and that means you have to go, the deeper you can go to who you are, and the more you can change your identity, the more change you can create, the better your life will be,
New Dove Men.
if you do it correctly. But also, the deeper you go, the more difficult it is, and the more threatened you're gonna feel about it, the less comfortable it's gonna feel. Because it's going to feel like some part of you is dying.
Silky beat.
And it's going to be counterintuitive because a lot of times in life,
all my brothers know we bout to
really
now. Spreading love and spreading drugs, we flood the whole town.
Just got to pay up in the bank, that's from the old sound. No 9-to-5 music, my life ignite the whole crowd. Take control, see a Louis on the road now. Popping bottles, smoking cookie, burn the whole pound. I'm high as fuck, we turning up, my family so proud. I'm feeling so proud, legacy be broke. Never got that I would take it this far. See my dreams be in between the sacred vision to the stars. With the goonies, you stay with the stories, so don't try to fool me. My brothers gon' rap for this shit. Changing in life with the shit. Skid the abyss, call my strap with the clip. Got endless options, homies double crossing, cause they know I'm popping. Gotta take precaution, cause nothing promised in the world that we live in. Indigo prodigy, wake up the children soon. Not me with a full so gazi. Kamikaze if you try to stop me. Brothers on me for the holy body. Got it with me, give me sloppy tappy, mommy. All my brothers know we bout to ball now. Spreading love and spreading drugs, we flood the whole town. Just got 2K up in the bank, that's from the old
old sound.
Let's say you were forced to go to church when you were young, so you started to hate religion.
We on the road now. Popping bottle, smoking cookie, burn a whole pound. I'm high as fuck, we turning up, my family so proud. I'm feeling so proud, legacy be profound.
Somebody else,
up my doja therapeutic, feel the calm aroma, conscious taking over, never gonna live in the past.
Somebody else, they were forced to go to church, and they ended up not hating religion, but becoming religiously indoctrinated and loving religion. So I'm not saying that just because your parents forced you to go to church, that's why you hate religion.
Ain't shit to me. Yeah, turn them down instantly. Drug addict, drain my energy.
That way for you, but for your friend or for your brother or sister, it might have just been exactly the opposite.
Shop with the kid might just get you employed. DMT by the end of the void. Heaven sent with his medicine. All my indigos with the cotton ends. Y'all waking up, never sleep again. Rest when I'm dead. Grind to the
lives
end.
and our psyches can take.
All my brothers know we bout to ball now. Spreading love and spreading trust and flood the whole town. Just got some paint up in the bank, that's from the old sounds. No 9-to-5 music, my life they make the whole crowd.
Theory effect where, a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil will cause a tornado in Texas. Like, everything is interconnected, and sometimes a little drop of something here or there in your life will change the trajectory of your life radically. These things accumulate exponentially, and it's sometimes difficult to predict which way. Are you going to end up hating religion or loving religion? The difference between those two can be razor thin. The difference could be as little as a single word that comes out of the mouth of your mother, father, brother, sister, or preacher. If they say one wrong word or one right word, that's going to make the difference between whether you hate religion or love religion for the rest of your life. Now, it's not always that fragile, but sometimes it really is on a razor's edge, balance on a razor's edge. Other examples might be like, you got approval, for example, for acting a class clown, for being funny and humorous. So therefore, you adopted this funny, humorous persona, you became very extroverted and social. And you still are that way today, and maybe today you survive that way. Maybe your whole career is built around that. Or for example, you got approval for getting good grades in school because your teachers and your parents lavished you with attention and love when you got these good grades. And because of that, you learn to now be an authority pleaser. Now, as an adult, you please authority figures and you try to please your boss, and your whole work and your whole career revolves around just pleasing authority figures. Because that's how you learned to get love. Or let's say, for example, you got approval for being pretty and beautiful when you were young. So you got obsessed with playing that up. And so you started dressing up and you put a lot of fake on and maybe you did some plastic surgery and your life is obsessed about this.
Sounding silly like a foreigner, dumping inside the sewer like a toilet dust. All that jacking with a feet. Rip your heart, I kill the beat. Got some knowledge from a freak. Yeah, I be sinning, but I keep the peace. Run it up like Forrest Gump, need no less than my Porsche. Not impressed, we don't show thumbs, we just shake heads out of boredom. Latex when your whore come to apex to be caught up.
Hey, this is Leo for Actualize.org. And in this video, what I want to talk about is how you create every single one of your emotions.
She think I'm playing for keeps. I run it up on a weekly.
Run it up, 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 run it up. All my indigos, run it up, run it up, run it up.
There is nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Have you heard that quote before? That's a quote from William Shakespeare, his play Hamlet. Hamlet says this famous